I'm 17 and I have a sister named Emma, 22, and a stepsister, Yuna, 22. They never got along well. I literally grew up with my sister talking shit about Yuna and how she just had an easier life because she was pretty. It's never been a secret that my sister thought that, and our parents think that too, so whenever Yuna was here, no one really tried to make an effort with her because she has it easy. I did my best to change this as I grew up, but Emma never did. It actually got worse. Nevertheless, she's still my sister and I love her. Emma also has always been the golden child, so she always got away with lots of stuff. When they were 19, Yuna started dating this guy. I don't want to go into the details, but he was just no good at all. Through this, Yuna stopped working since he said that he wouldn't date a slut. Literally said that in front of us. No one, sadly including me, said anything. She started skipping classes, stopped going out with her friends, and coming to family dinners as often. It was really bad. Recently, they finally broke up though. I don't know what happened and it isn't my business nor anyone else's, but Yuna came to stay with us, so the three of us are living together with our parents again. On Tuesday, we all went out to have dinner when Emma started questioning Yuna about her relationship. Just being there was uncomfortable already, and Yuna would refuse to talk, so Emma kept insisting and our parents were pressuring her to talk too, which was awkward as fuck. It all escalated quickly, and soon enough, Yuna started crying and just left to go outside. I went with her and she was sobbing so violently, I legit thought she would have a panic attack or something. I stayed with her until her Uber came. She didn't want to go with the family, and then went back to the table and I was just raging. Now this is where I might be the asshole. I started screaming at Emma about how she's a bitch and how she knows how hurtful her questions were and how she's always done this, blah blah blah. I also screamed at my parents for allowing it, but mostly I just screamed at Emma. She didn't say or do anything at all and we ended up leaving. My parents are so mad at me and Yuna now, and I was punished. I can't see my friends for a few weeks and Emma just keeps calling me names. I'm not really sorry, but I know I could have handled it better or at least screamed in private, but I also know that I made a huge scene in public and hurt my sister. Am I the asshole for screaming at my sister in the middle of dinner? Last summer, my first husband passed away after being in a car accident a month before. The doctors expected him to pull through yet be paralyzed from the waist down, but he had already had health problems and the trauma from the accident ultimately prevailed. I, along with his parents, organized a funeral at a spacious old Catholic cathedral. I kept thinking to myself the whole time, this place is too beautiful for a funeral. For some reason, it felt wrong having such a sad occasion there. I even remember wishing that I had married my first husband there instead of the outdoor wedding we had. Fast forward to early 2022, I reunited with an ex-boyfriend of mine from years before. We started dating again, and before we knew it, we were engaged. I've been criticized a lot for how fast I moved on, but I guess everyone heals differently. We started planning for the wedding in March. The wedding hasn't happened yet, it'll happen in May, and we decided that we'd have it in the same cathedral where my first husband's funeral was held. I'm still in contact with my first husband's parents, and they were happy for me when I told them that I was dating and then when I got engaged. In a phone call, my first husband's mother asked me about the wedding, so I said that they could come if they wanted to. She seemed a bit taken back at first, so I totally thought I screwed up, but then she said that she'd love to. Then I told her that we held at the same cathedral as my first husband's funeral, and she went off on me. This is how the conversation went. I said, we'll be marrying at blank cathedral. Then there was silence. She said my name and said, I just can't believe it. I said, believe what? Then again there was silence. That's when she said, I'm sorry, this is just appalling to me. I said, I want to have our wedding there in honor of my first husband. I would have married him there if I knew about the place. And again, silence. She replied that I'm moving on too quickly and I need to slow down to think about my first husband and how he would feel and that I can't replace him. I replied, I'm not replacing him, I'm trying to keep his memory alive. I found love again, but I will never forget him. She said, you're moved on. You're moved on. He hasn't moved on. He will never move on, and I'm sure if he were alive, he'd want to. That's when I said I'm sorry, and then she just hung up the phone on me. I haven't spoken to her or her husband since. I still plan on having me and my fiance's wedding there, but it just puts a bad taste in my mouth knowing that my first husband's parents are against it. But after all, they aren't involved in the wedding anyway, so I don't see why they should have a say. I wish they'd at least support me because I've been to hell and back, but this isn't that now. I'm in a better place and they don't like to see me happy, but I also kind of feel selfish since they aren't. Am I the asshole for holding my wedding at the same venue as my first husband's funeral? I'm 34 and currently about 6 months pregnant. I'm pregnant with me and my husband's second child. Me and my mother-in-law honestly have a pretty bitter relationship. She doesn't approve of me or my family background. When I was having my first child, my husband had asked me if I'd consider letting my mother-in-law be in the delivery room. I told him absolutely not, and afterwards he never really brought it up. I ended up having my husband and my mother there with me as support. Me and my husband are now discussing about who I want in the delivery room, and I told him it was fine with the same arrangement I had last time. My husband was clearly not happy about the decision as I could clearly hear him mumbling something under his breath. I asked if he had a problem with the arrangement. He actually spoke and claimed that he did. He stated it was massively unfair that I would allow my mother in the delivery room but not his. He mentioned that since I got to choose who was in the delivery room last time, he should get to choose who gets to be inside of the room this time. I told him that he was insane if he thought that I would let his mother see me in extreme pain. It would be an incredibly uncomfortable situation. He was incredibly upset and left the house. I've been trying his friends to see if they've seen him recently, but without any luck. I contacted my mother-in-law and she said that she absolutely had no idea that my husband wanted her in the delivery room in the first place, and she hasn't heard from him in a while. I'm honestly kind of freaking out both from stress and guilt. I'm worried that my husband isn't okay, but I also can't help feeling guilty that I drove him away. I don't know if I should stay with my current decision anymore. Am I the asshole for telling my husband that if he wants my mother-in-law in the delivery room, then he can't be there either? Imagine meeting up with someone online only for them to end up being an active serial killer. Heather Saul was a sex worker in West Virginia when she came across a man online who wanted to be her client. It's unclear whether Heather took him on as a client, but the man did end up getting her address and showing up to her home. As soon as he gained entry, he attacked Heather by strangling her, pointing a weapon at her and telling her that he'd kill her if she didn't comply with his orders. He then points the weapon to her side and says to her, "Live or die." She trusts her gut and thinks to herself that if he was going to use it on her, he would have by now, and in those few seconds of silence, she decided to fight for her life. The man lunges on top of her and sits on her chest, not letting her breathe. Somehow she manages free and spots a nearby tool, grabs it and swings it at the man. He then sets his gun down in order to grab the tool from her and overpower her, which is when she grabs his weapon and immediately shoots him. He slowly falls to the ground deceased. Heather's back was broken and her shoulder was dislocated, but she went to the neighbors and told them to call 911. She was hysterical when police arrived. When they searched the man's body, they found 4 sets of handcuffs, but what they found in his car is even more chilling. This man had a full-on kill kit in his car, foreshadowing what could have happened to Heather if he had been able to subdue and rape her. The kill kit contained numerous weapons along with duct tape, a shovel, garbage bags, and a tub big enough to fit an adult woman with bleach and other cleaning supplies. Police were able to link this kill kit to a total of 9 women who were either murdered or disappeared across 3 states. This man's name was Neil Falls. He was born in 1969 and always had a troubled past. Around the 2000s is when he was caught abusing animals, and in 2008 he was asked to quit a job after sexually harassing a coworker. On the driver's side floor, Falls left behind a significant piece of information. There was a list written down of women's names along with their ages. It's believed that those were his next intended victims if Heather Saul hadn't killed him in self-defense. She was never charged for any crimes and became a media sensation after this. She was brave enough to fight off her attacker, bringing an end to an active serial killer and saving multiple women from suffering a grisly fate. I, 39, have a son, 15, and he brought a friend around today. They immediately went to their room, and I assumed they would just play some video games or whatever, so I was totally fine leaving them. It was about 30 minutes in when I walked past, and I heard sounds such as, "Oh my god, that's so good," and "It's so good with that in it," and various sounds. It really sounded like they were having gay sex. I was super weirded out by it, but I quickly went downstairs and waited for his friend to leave. When his friend left an hour or two later, I asked my son what they were doing in his room. Because although I don't mind him being gay, and I know it's normal for teenagers to have sex, a condom should really be used. So I planned to confront him about that. However, the answer shocked me to my very core. They weren't having sex, they were eating hummus. I was shocked and initially didn't believe it. We had never had hummus before, and I asked him to show me the hummus if this was true. So he did, and I ate hummus for the first time, and oh my god, was it good. We experimented with different things in it like bread and carrots, and it was great. Apparently his friend had heard about how he had never had hummus before and thought this was absurd, so he planned a date for the hummus party. So yeah, it ended up being quite a good ending, and I discovered how nice hummus was. Storytime about when a customer only wanted a man to help her. When I was about 20 years old, I was a department manager in a big box hardware store. People said I acted 25, but I didn't even look 18. As a young female, I saw my fair amount of sexual discrimination, but the worst always came from women. This is the story of one such woman. I managed the paint department. I had 3 associates who worked for me. They loved me as a boss because I bought them a department radio and took the shifts that they didn't want. I worked Friday close and Saturday mid so my 2 younger guys could have time to have fun on Friday nights, and the older gentleman took early Saturday mornings so they could sleep off their fun. In trade, I gave the older gentleman his ideal schedule. My team was awesome. One day I was in the department alone and a lady came up and asked me where she could find the 5-gallon oil-based primer. I let her know that my location didn't carry the 5-gallon size of that primer. She told me that we did and said that it was shelved right there, while suggesting I was too stupid to remember. I let her know that another location had exactly what she was looking for and that it was in fact in the exact location in that store. She let me know how stupid she thought that I was for thinking that she could mix up stores. Then she began yelling loudly, insisting that I get a man out there to help her because she wanted someone competent and not a stupid little girl. Her husband actually tried to step in at that point, but I just smiled and let her know that a male paying associate would be clocking in any minute and I would be happy to direct him to her as soon as he's on the clock. I smiled and waited for Joe to clock in. Joe was great and I knew that he could handle this or I wouldn't have put him in this situation, but Joe was also new. He was learning things super quick, but still relied on the rest of us for help. When I saw Joe walking up, I quickly said that there was a customer who needed help. I let him know that she was super upset and asked him to do his best to answer her questions. Joe walked up to the lady. She said, "Finally, a man." She asked her question, explained where the product should be, and waited. Joe calmly let her know that he had never seen us carry 5-gallon size of oil-based primer, but said that he could check with the paint department manager. She was happy and loudly said that she was happy to be getting some real help. Joe walked up to me and started asking me about the 5-gallon oil-based primers. The lady quickly walked up and asked him what he was doing. He turned and said, "This is my manager, she runs the department." The husband laughed out loud, the woman stormed off, and I bought Joe lunch. Storytime about when I messed up at playing Truth or Dare with my boyfriend. Last night, I had my boyfriend and a few of our mutual friends over to my apartment to drink and play games. Well, after a few hours, we were all pretty wasted and playing Truth or Dare. When my boyfriend picked Truth, I couldn't think of a good question, so I asked jokingly which one of my friends he would sleep with. I've always been secure in our relationship, so I wasn't asking because I was suspicious. I was 100% sure he would say none of them or give a joke answer. But no. Without hesitation, he pointed to our friend Stephanie and said, "Probably Stephanie," then looked at our boyfriend Jacob and said, "No disrespect, man, but damn, you're lucky you get to hit that," and looked her up and down. The room went silent. Stephanie had a disgusted look on her face. She crossed her arms to cover her chest and looked like she was about to blow up at him. He picked up on the fact that everyone was shocked by his answer and said, "What?" Asked and answered, "Come on, let's move on." Stephanie got up out of her seat and went outside to have a smoke. Her boyfriend followed after her. I got up too and he started looking panicked, saying, "What did I do wrong? You asked me a question and I answered it truthfully. You shouldn't have asked if you didn't want to know the answer." I just said, You're right, I shouldn't have asked. I went outside and apologized profusely to Stephanie and Jacob for putting them in that position. Stephanie said it's not my fault, but I felt awful. If I had known that he would give a real answer, I never would have asked him that. I went back inside and all of my guests were packing their things and leaving. When they were all gone, my boyfriend said that he wanted to break up because I'm too dramatic. I was emotionally numb in that moment, so I said, oh good, I love when the trash takes itself out. He started crying and saying he didn't mean it. I ordered him an Uber and let him stay inside until the Uber got there. I held it together until he was gone and then I finally cried. He kicked himself out of the friend group by leaving the group chats and not talking to us anymore, and I broke up with him because, well, I don't see him the same way anymore. I am a widower. I lost my wife, Anne, 34, just minutes after she gave birth to our first baby, Sammy. She had a difficult pregnancy, so I took indefinite leave 3 months before she was due. Sammy's 4 months old now, and before I went back to work, I told my mother-in-law, Sandra, 56, about my plans and if she can recommend a nanny to take care of my daughter when I work. She offered to do it for free. I told her she's free to come by any time during the day if she feels uncomfortable with a nanny looking after Sammy, but she insisted on doing it herself. So I said yes and gave her a copy of the house keys. She comes 30 minutes before I leave for work, and when I come home, she stays for dinner and leaves after putting Sammy to sleep. Everything was fine for the first couple of weeks until I noticed that Sammy's not feeding as much. Her formula is barely touched. I asked Sandra about it and why Sammy's not feeding well. She said that she's trying to breastfeed my daughter. At first I thought she was joking, then I realized that she wasn't. She said that Sammy needs to latch on for a few minutes every day to activate her milk production. I almost lost it. I told her that she cannot do that and that she needs to stop. She said that she will, but I caught her again when I walked into my daughter's room and she was forcing Sammy to latch. I confronted her and told her that she's no longer my baby's nanny. I didn't ask for the key back as she's still welcome to my home anytime she wants to visit. I asked for a 1-week leave from work to take care of my daughter and find a nanny. I found one, but after 2 days she never returned. I called her and she said that my mother fired her the day before. I asked her to describe the woman and I was living when I realized it was Sandra. She came into my house using her key and fired my nanny. I was about to call her when she showed up and convoluted the story like how I hired an incompetent nanny, etc, etc. I told her to leave, but she refused and told me that she's calling CPS because I'm endangering my child. We argued back and forth before I called the police and she was charged with trespassing. I know my mother-in-law is grieving the loss of her daughter, I am too, but she crossed the line when she disregarded my wishes. My sister-in-law and brother-in-law are calling me ruthless and I am now second-guessing myself. Have I taken it too far by calling the police? Am I the asshole for calling the police on my mother-in-law after she entered my home and fired my babysitter?